I don't know whether you can hear me or not. Yes, right, that's brilliant, thank you. Hi everybody, my name's Dominic Brankin. I work on the Universal Credit Programme at the Department for Work and Pensions. I hope you're all enjoying Civil Service Live. I've had a great time meeting lots of people that I used to work with, some that I work with now, and some of them have made the journey south from Newcastle, which is really good of them. I'm going to talk to you about universal credit, but I want to really set it in the context of the DWP story. Now, I know a lot of us in this room work in DWP and consequently will be familiar with the DWP story. I hope it will bear repeating because the things that we're trying to do in universal credit really are part and parcel of that bigger story that we're trying to tell. Our purpose as a department really matters. The challenge that we're facing is bigger than we've really ever seen before. And so to be able to respond to that challenge, we have to do what it takes to become a truly extraordinary department. And that really is the crux of the DWP story. What we try and do is to help people lift themselves out of poverty and stay out of poverty. And we do that either through helping them into work or into more work, through encouragement to saving, or through the various other kinds of support that we provide. It is a genuinely important public service that we deliver. And I hope everybody in the room who works for DWP is very proud of the role that we play in changing millions of people's lives. I was going to start just by using a few numbers. George W. Bush knew about numbers. It's clearly a budget, it's got lots of numbers in it. I guarantee you there is a George W. Bush quotation for any situation. Absolutely anything. I mean, standing here now, I appreciate the challenge of stringing your words together in a way that makes sense and can engage people on a topic. And I can't really imagine what it must be like to be in that position and have that scrutiny. But it's still hilarious. You know, talking about a firm belief that human beings and fish can coexist peacefully. And he did say it, you can listen to it on YouTube. DWP is huge. As an organisation. It's the biggest public service delivery department in the UK. We serve about 20 million customers, and last year we spent £200 billion on benefits and pensions. Every working day we make about 3 million benefit payments, take about 22,000 new claims for benefits. There are around 3,000 applications for state pension and 1,000 for pension credit. We take, I think it's something like 15,000 job vacancies every working day and deal with around 830,000 job searches via the internet. And on the other end of the digital scale, we go out and visit about 2,500 people every working day. It's a big enough operation before you even start trying to change it. And we've got to overlay that with what I think is, you know, a hugely ambitious programme of reform that our ministers came to us with. I found a quotation from Salvador Dali about ambition, saying at 6 he wanted to be a cook, at 7 he wanted to be Napoleon, and his ambition was growing ever since then. There is virtually nothing that we do that isn't being changed. Working age benefits are changing, the state pension is changing, workplace pensions are changing, disability pension benefits are changing, and child maintenance is changing. That represents a massive challenge for any organisation. And for us to be able to respond effectively to that, we really do have to be a department that can combine continuing to deliver those vitally important public services to millions of fellow citizens at the same time as landing ministers' once-in-a-generation reform of welfare. And this really is the biggest change to welfare since its inception in 1946. And I know this must be true because Nick Hewer said it this morning on the video that we saw, we've got to continue to cut our costs, and we have to make sure that we can demonstrate we are providing value for money to the taxpayer. So that really does demand that we find out what it means to be an extraordinary department and take the steps necessary to do that. Some of the things that we're trying to focus on are about being a department where what works for our claimants, customers and frontline operations is what comes first. We don't always get that right. We certainly haven't always got that right in years gone by, but that's absolutely crucial if we are going to become this extraordinary department. We've got to be a place where everybody accepts and takes responsibility for improving what we deliver and for leading a change within our own part of the organisation. It's got to be a place where leaders actively listen and ask and then act. We've got to be the kind of department that operates well together. We're putting a lot of effort into becoming one DWP. For any large-scale organisation, it's often very difficult to get real coherence and consistency across its different bits, especially when they do very different things. But if we don't do that, we lose massive opportunities to improve the way we do things. It's also a place where we want to be really confident in the way we engage with our partners and stakeholders outside the organisation, because that's our opportunity to showcase public service at its best. And that's a worthwhile ambition, and it's one that we should be striving for. So it is a huge ambition, and it demands a significant response in return. And it struck me that it sounded a bit like an adventure, but then I found that Roald Amundsen, who knew a bit about these sorts of things, didn't have much time for adventure and thought that it was just bad planning. And I think they are a brilliant 5 words to get home a really important point, that adventure is just bad planning. And bad planning isn't what gets you what's been delivered over the last 3 years or so. When the government came in May 2010, it gave DWP and the rest of the civil service a to-do list that was probably longer, better worked up and more challenging than pretty much anybody could remember. And yet, you know, even against the background of the economic challenges that we know we've been facing, when you look at what's been delivered, I think it is truly extraordinary. Even in those very early days, we saw the introduction of the work contract, special disability employment programme. We had the work programme introduced, followed up by the youth contract. We brought in the automatic enrolment of workplace pensions, universal job match, was launched last year, as was the Pathfinder for the new child maintenance scheme. You know, bringing it a little bit more up to date, this year we've had the launch of the personal independence payment, the replacement for disability living allowance. That started as a Pathfinder and is now growing, and all new claims are being taken to personal independence payment. We introduced the benefit cap in 4 authorities in London. That's now beginning its national implementation. This month, we localised council tax support. We had social fund reform. We're reforming the appeals service, the way we handle appeals against our decisions. You know, there really isn't much that isn't changing. And then at the end of April this year, we launched the Universal Credit Pathfinder. It was 8 a.m. on the 29th of April in Ashton-under-Lyne Job Centre, supported by our service centres in Glasgow and Bolton. And this morning, at 8 o'clock, we expanded that to include Wigan. So we've started very, very small, and I'll talk more about that in a minute, but we've already begun the progressive expansion of the Universal Credit Pathfinder. Did everybody see all the news coverage of it this morning? No, because there wasn't any. You know, it's not a story. It's working, and it's working well, and we want to keep it that way for as long as we can. So I do think that that really does represent a truly extraordinary response to a set of challenges. I will talk a little bit more now about universal credit. This is Edwin Land. He invented the Polaroid camera, which is completely irrelevant, but I don't want people wondering when you leave. So he said that he wouldn't undertake a project unless it was manifestly important and nearly impossible. And manifestly important and nearly impossible is a pretty neat summary of what we're trying to do with universal credit. Why? Because the current system, the combination of benefits and tax credits that we have today, is too complex either to administer or, from a claimant perspective, to properly understand. It's too expensive and too prone to fraud and error. And crucially, it doesn't give a strong enough incentive for work. For far too many people, far too often, work doesn't pay. The rate at which benefit is withdrawn when somebody works or does a little bit more work can in some cases be the equivalent of 95, 96 pence in the pound. And that, that will not incentivise a rational human being to behave in a different way. And universal credit is all about work. We are taking half a dozen benefits and tax credits and looking to introduce something more streamlined, more straightforward to administer, but at its heart, it is all about work and earning. And for individuals and households to earn enough not to be dependent on the state and to be self-sufficient. So that's the thing that drives it. That's based around a changed relationship between claimants and our advisors, who we're now developing as coaches. And it was really interesting hearing Bronwyn this morning, for those who were in the hall, talking about her hero, Catherine Granger, and that coach-athlete relationship, because that's precisely the kind of relationship we're aiming for with claimants on universal credit. It's about a coach challenging and supporting an individual to do better, to do more, and to do things differently. And I'll talk a bit about the feedback that we've had already on the way that's working and the tools that we're using to support it, what we call the claimant commitment, which in essence is the contract between ourselves and our claimants, setting out very precisely what we expect them to do in return for the support that we're giving them. But it is also about a new benefit system, and it does take half a dozen benefits and tax credits and replaces them with a single, simpler payment that is paid monthly to a household. And there's a lot in there that for a lot of people is fine, but for some is very challenging. And that's one of the issues that we need to deal with as we continue to roll out universal credit, is how do you achieve the balance between a service that works very well for the majority of people who can manage it for themselves, but also has everything else wrapped around it for those who struggle. So some of the difficulties, some of the challenges that this has presented for us have been, for example, how do you build a digital service that does just that allows those people who are comfortable and able to use it very easily, but also has the right support mechanisms to enable others to use it as well. So far, and this is a very small Pathfinder, so I don't want to claim any more for the numbers than they can bear, but so far the vast majority of claims to universal credit have been made online. It's better than 9 out of 10 have been made online, and we know that the vast majority of those people are finding the process very simple and very straightforward, and that's great, but it is a small sample, and it's also a claimant group that ought to be better able to deal with it. But there's a really important and encouraging message that we can build a service that people can use in a fairly straightforward way. Building that meant doing things rather differently. One of the things that we've had to learn as an organisation and do differently on universal credit is just how do you develop a new system like this in a reasonably short period of time, which, although we're going for something that's simpler than what we've got today, is still a complicated thing. And the way we've gone about doing this has been through a combination of some quite traditional project and program management techniques. Some people will be familiar with the waterfall terminology, doing things in a very linear way to bring new products into service. And we've had to do that because a lot of our legacy systems are developed in that way, and so we've got to be able to dock effectively with those. But we've also been using agile methodologies and approaches, learning from different industries about different ways to build particularly new IT-enabled services and specifically digital services. And that is, it's no more or less than actually making sure you've got all the right people in a room at the right time to build a service for a particular type of claimant or a particular circumstance. So you literally have the lawyers in the room with the policy specialists, with the business architects, with the IT experts, with the guidance writers and the L&D deliverers, all focused around what is required to deliver this service for this claimant type. What we didn't do, but are doing now, is, if you look in outside industry, what you'll also have in the room is the people actually writing the code at the same time. So you build it as you go. That's one thing that we didn't do to get us to the Pathfinder, but is what we're now exploring as we look forward to the next phase of rollout. Some of the other things that were particularly challenging for us, we've had to try our best to coordinate this across 3 very big delivery systems: our own, HMRC's, and the 380 local authorities that administer housing benefit. We've had some real success in that. We've also found some of it very difficult, particularly how do you engage with a community of local authorities, which are each and every one of them unique in a particular kind of way. We've tried to bring secondees in, still have a lot of secondees in on the programme, but really sort of having to continually work hard to work effectively across organisational boundaries and bring in expertise that we don't have. We did start very small. I said I'd talk a little bit more about this. The Pathfinder, when it went live in Ashton-under-Lyne, was in 4 postcodes. So just to get a sense of the scale, it was just 4 postcodes. That's probably 3 or 4 times bigger now with Wigan, but even that isn't massive. This is all about a safe, controlled start. It allows us to control the flow into the service and make sure that if there are issues, if there are problems, actually we can respond effectively to that because we're not having to fight fires somewhere else. We've got very good, very strong control over what's happening. And we started with really fairly straightforward claimant types. So single people with no dependents, they can have housing costs. It's a very narrow segment of our claimant group. Again, it's about doing this in a controlled, safe, managed way. Once you're through that gateway into universal credit, though, the whole thing exists behind it, because there is a driving principle for us, which is when you're once on universal credit, you're always on it, until or unless you earn enough to mean that you're living independently. So everything exists to deal with somebody becoming ill, to deal with somebody bringing a partner, potentially dependent child into the household, certainly to deal with going into work and changing work and dealing with fluctuating earnings, all the way up to if somebody goes into a religious order. It's there, we can deal with that, we know what we'll do. We haven't had to do that yet, and we may not have to throughout the whole of the Pathfinder. That narrow gateway in hides the vast extent of what's there and what exists to support people on universal credit. How's the Pathfinder going? It's going very well, thank you very much. I've mentioned large proportion online. That is very positive, very encouraging, but not to get too enthusiastic about it, given the numbers and the claimant types involved. We know that people are responding differently to the claimant commitment. Our work services coaches are telling us that it's giving them, for the first time in a long time, the ability to have really tough, frank conversations with people about the effort they're putting into finding work. Universal credit requires a minimum 35 hours a week of job search because finding work is a job in itself. That's a very, very strong drive from our ministers, a very clear policy priority for universal credit. People need to be active all the time looking for work. And that's clearly hitting home. What some claimants are saying back to us, though, is this is the first time they've felt that we've really focused on them as individuals. Because of the degree of detail that we're going into and the specificity in that claimant commitment, they're getting a really strong feeling of engagement with them as individuals. And that's encouraging too. And again, this is all about early learning that we can use to further develop this thing as we roll it out. But, you know, this is probably, I think it's safe to say, far better than we had expected. But we're still watching it very, very closely, and will do until we expand a little bit further at the end of the month into Warrington and Oldham. Basically, the Pathfinder is doing what we wanted it to do, which was test the service in the live environment and help us understand what we might do better as we go forward. It sounds like, you know, a pretty good start, but it's not done. And, you know, Kissinger says each success only buys a ticket to the next difficult problem. Universal credit has got another 4 years to go before we finish rolling it out, replacing all new claims to the benefits and tax credits it's replacing, and also migrating every existing claimant into universal credit. And that's before you look as well at some of the other changes that the department is a lot earlier in the process of making. We've announced this year that the single-tier pension will be launched in April 2016, which doesn't sound that far away and is a big enough change for the organisation to have to manage in its own right. Also, last week, we had the spending round announcement, which pretty much added, I think, to everybody's to-do list in you know, the organisations represented here, and at the same time asked us to continue to find improvements in productivity, to find and realise further efficiencies, you know, and frankly, to be able to do more with less. So that just ups the ante again in terms of the level of challenge that we and all of us in all of our organisations have got to deliver on that ever-increasing to-do list. And I think that's why the Civil Service Reform Plan and the Capabilities Plan is particularly relevant here. For those who were in Bronwyn's session at the beginning, on the screen beforehand, there was flashing up there the 4 priorities in the Capabilities Plan about digital, about commercial, about leadership and managing change, and the 4th one, programme and project management. You know, all about change, all about helping us getting better at managing change, because, you know, we finish one and another one comes along hot on its heels. And if we don't keep improving the way we do things, if we don't keep trying to find better and more effective ways of managing this vast array of change, then, you know, we're going to start, I think, to struggle to even get out of the starting blocks on some of these. So although we've been using you know, agile methodologies to help us implement universal credit, we're pretty sure that we can be better at the way we use that. So we're very keen to learn from DEFRA, for example, and the work that's been done in the Rural Payments Agency, and to see how agile has been used to drive and deliver that change, and whether there are ways that that's been done there that we can bring into DWP and give ourselves the best chance possible of success moving forward. It's not just about sort of organisational learning and organisational changes. You know, I wanted to change the world, but I found the only thing I could be sure of changing is myself. We are trying very hard to do a lot more to harness the innovation that exists in DWP, that has always existed in DWP, often at a very, very local level. What's always persisted is a real difficulty in being able to lift an individual example of success and something that works and turn that into the way an office or a district or a larger part of the organisation operates. Really tapping into the ingenuity and creativity of our whole workforce has got to be a priority if we're to meet the scale of challenge that we've got. And we know it happens, and there are some great examples of, we've had policy and operations colleagues working together on our special payments system. We make a special payment in cases of maladministration, where a claimant might be either financially disadvantaged because of what we've done, or we believe we need to compensate them. We've managed to reduce expenditure on that by something like 80 to 90% over a year because we got the right people working together to understand the issue and develop a solution. There's another example of a receptionist in one of our job centres in Edge Hill. It's a chap called Julian Close, and he knew about universal credit, he'd heard about it, but rather than waiting for, you know, cascade of communications and all of those sorts of things, he took responsibility to go and learn, to go and find out, and to bring that back to his office. So he's played a really important role in educating his colleagues in that job centre to understand the real impact and the scale of the change that universal credit will bring. That's been taken into other offices, that's been taken into the district as a whole, and hopefully that will just grow and grow. But it's a great example of every individual, what an individual can do if we all take responsibility for leading our part of the organisation. And that is not about being in a leadership position, it's simply about leading on behalf of the whole. That you will all have lots and lots of examples of things like that yourself, and you know, events like this are really great opportunities to share those. But it's really just to make the point that most of the innovation and the change that we will see that will help us get through the next stage of the challenge is not stuff that's going to be top-down driven. It's going to be our ability to tap into and use and exploit the creativity and ingenuity that exists in what is still a pretty large workforce. Been speaking for far too long now, and what I wanted to do was to try and get more of a conversation going in the room and between all of us rather than just between me and people in the seats. So what I'm going to do is just break for 5 minutes, talk amongst yourselves, reflect on what I've said, and then we'll try and fit in 10 minutes or so of questions, comments, ideas. I'd really like to hear about, you know, having reflected on the DWP story, universal credit's place in it, and some of the things we're having to do differently. You know, what might that mean for you? What should we be doing differently? And by all means, if you do want to ask me specific questions about universal credit, I'm very happy to get those as well, and I'll do my best to answer them. But let's just break for 5 minutes, and then I'll call us all back when there's about 10 minutes left to go. Okay. We have a couple of roving mics situated in the corners at the moment, so let's see how quickly we can get our Cabinet Office colleagues running around the room. I don't think we have one upstairs, so if there are colleagues upstairs who do want to ask a question, kind of, you know, shout, and we'll do our best. Questions, comments, ideas? Don't feel obliged. Oh, there's one down, right down at the front as well. Can we take the one? Was there one towards the back?
The 9 out of 10 of claimants doing that online. How's that been driven? Is it that they've been advised to do that? Is it just that that's the only course of action they can take? Can you give us more information on that?
Yeah, sure. It's not the only way of claiming. We do offer a telephony claim service, and in extremis we can take face-to-face claims. It's clearly our preferred channel. And you know, increasing the level of digital take-up is something that applies more widely in our organisation. So we've been increasing the number of JSA claims that have been made using our online service over the last year or so. All of our communication and marketing materials and the orientation products for claimants make it clear that gov.uk is the place to go to make that claim. But we do at all stages make clear the fact that there are alternatives. To be honest, I was surprised that the proportion is so high. But I do think a lot of that is because of the nature of the claimant group we're dealing with at the moment in the Pathfinder. But it's clearly very encouraging that that's what's happening. We did do a piece of work to try and make sure that we weren't losing people somehow. And we are very confident that we haven't seen people going into legacy benefits when they shouldn't, and also that we aren't losing people geographically. So, we're not seeing people making claims at different offices rather than the one that's relevant for their postcode. So it's a combination, really, of the way we've set it up, the way we've positioned the rest of our own organisation. So in terms of providing advice and guidance, if somebody's just got a query, we are pointing people to gov.uk as being the place to make their claim. Is that okay?
Can I ask what the training package is going to be? Is it going to be facilitated, or is it going to be mainly e-learning? Because there's such a huge change here in respect to what we're doing now.
It's a fairly traditional now, blended approach. What we are learning and really found, because we started so small, when we went live with Universal Credit in Ashton, we also went live with the claimant commitment in Wigan, Oldham and Warrington. And what that has taught us very quickly is that using the claimant commitment before bringing Universal Credit in as a payment was a very effective way of driving some of the cultural change within our own people. And it's for a very simple, straightforward reason. It's just one thing to get used to, rather than that and the new service and the structure of the benefit, blah, 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 all that sort of thing. And a lot of the learning in support of the claimant commitment was facilitated learning. I think a recognition that if you're going to drive culture, you do that through the engagement between people. And consequently, our leaders at every level have a really important role in making that happen. There's a whole raft of L&D material supporting Universal Credit. There's also knowledge management, which is the online knowledge service, which is accessible to both claimants and to our own people. So basically, whichever part of the process you're going through, there's a tell me more button or how do I button, and that gives you the detail behind it to help people through it. And that does mean that we don't have to get into too much of the technical detail underpinning it. So I know that's a broader response, but I think for the cultural stuff, we'll see a lot more leader-led, manager-led, facilitator-led learning. And this is the kind of thing that starting small helps us understand what's the best blend to get the skill level to where we need it to be. Did we pick up any more as we were going? Oh, there's a couple down here.
Hi, I also had a question about the online applications. In the past, you could claim for tax credits online, but that had to be shut down because of the sheer amount of fraudulent applications.
Yeah.
I was wondering what steps you were taking to make sure that didn't happen again.
First thing to say is HMRC colleagues have been extraordinarily generous in sharing the lessons of that experience. It's clearly not something anybody wants anybody else to have to go through. That really has been invaluable. We've just changed its name and I can't remember what to, so never mind. We have a Joint Secure Operations Centre, which is basically our cyber defence for Universal Credit. We know that our front-end security is trapping not necessarily malicious claims. On day one, we know there were lots and lots of people who just wanted to have a look and see what it was like. The system trapped that and prevented it. But we do know that it is preventing malicious attacks as well. And the 234 Harry Potters that tried to claim on the 30th of April couldn't get through, and that's great. There is one big sort of process difference that's really important for this. Because these are all people in the all work requirements group, so they have full conditionality in terms of their work search, we see every single one of them. So the backstop for us at the moment is we will have that individual in one of our offices and we will verify their identity as part of that. So that's a really, that's a big source of comfort for us. As we move forward and develop the service, then the sophistication of the security solution will need to grow with it. But at the moment, we're keeping the bad guys out and seem to be letting the right people through. And there was one a bit further back.
Hello. Yep.
Hi.
Back to Universal Credit. It's the claimant commitment.
Yeah.
Where a job seeker is meant to be searching for 35 hours a week. I was under the impression that universal credit is nearly all online, or a lot of it is online. So how on earth are you going to monitor that?
Some of that comes through Universal Job Match. We launched last year, where individuals can set up their own account. It's like Monster, well, it's run by Monster, but it's an online sort of vacancy handling service. Employers can manage their own vacancies and individuals can manage their own applications. And we ask that our claimants who use Universal Job Match give their work services coach access to their account. And where they do that, actually, we can directly see what the claimant is doing using Universal Job Match. And we had the Work and Pensions Select Committee visiting the Pathfinder last week. And one of the claims that we were looking through there, and a lot of this is driven by the claimant and how they manage their account with Universal Job Match. But we're looking at one in particular, which was incredibly detailed about the effort and the activity the individual had been undertaking. Others are not so much. And that starts to rely more then on the relationship with the work services coach. And because the claimant commitment is a tailored claimant commitment, if we need to, we could see people every day and make sure that we are very closely watching what they're doing. There may be others where our confidence level is significantly higher and we don't need to intervene as much. Again, it's something else for us to learn about how best to do it. Not everybody has got a Universal Job Match account. Not everybody who has a Job Match account lets us look at it. So, we have to find ways of being able to manage it in the round. Any more?
Hiya. I'd just like to ask a question. What IT systems are you going to be using for universal credits? And are we going to have the same problems as we had with new tax credits when it was first introduced and there was a lot of IT problems?
Well, we hope not. We have got the universal credit system is made up of a number of big blocks that deal with data gather, evidence management, payments management, all of those sorts of things. So there is a new layer of technology that allows us to use the web-based application, take that information in, and then do what we need to do. Part of the rationale for starting very small, and I'll reiterate again, it's very, very small, was that we could test the robustness of those systems. So far, the service has been available pretty much all the time since we turned it on. The only time it hasn't been is when we've taken it down for maintenance, as you do with any sort of web-based service. And we are, as claimants move through their journey, we are able to test different elements of the systems and the way they work together. And one of the really important ones for us to have confidence in is the relationship between HMRC's RTI, real-time information, the updated PAYE system, and the Universal Credit Service. And right now, that's working incredibly well. We're seeing the Universal Credit interest being logged on real-time information, and we're seeing the earnings being notified back into Universal Credit as they are made. So when the employer makes the payment, that gets notified to HMRC, and that's coming through to us. So some of the payments that we are making already are taking account of earnings, and in some cases fluctuating earnings, in that calculation. So starting small and building from there is really the main way we're trying to mitigate those kinds of experiences that we've had in the past. We won't go bigger until we're confident that the thing that we've got running can cope at a larger volume. So far it is, but it's at a very, very small scale. Any more before I... Oh, yeah.
You mentioned this was a once-in-a-generation change. How did the department react when ministers asked you to do that?
It sort of conjures up impressions of Nigel Hawthorne saying that's very brave, Minister, and how novel that is. it was clear that whatever the outcome of the election, there was going to be significant change in welfare. And there's a pretty strong political consensus around the need to do something different. So I think, you know, it wasn't really a case of, you know, we come in on the day after the coalition agreement was signed and figure out what needed to be done. I think another point is when the government came in, yeah, the groundwork for universal credit was done by the Centre for Social Justice, the think tank that Ian Duncan Smith set up when he lost the leadership of the Conservative Party. And they've spent a decade working on this policy, basically. So their report, called Dynamic Benefits, it's 387 pages long, but it is worth reading, was there. You know, this wasn't a case of, we've got an idea that we'd like to revolutionise the delivery of welfare. Here's 2 pages, go and make it happen. It was a very, very well thought through set of proposals. And that gave us an incredibly strong basis on which to build. It's still huge, you know, and reforming that at the same time as reforming child maintenance and the pension system and disability benefits is a massive ask for the organisation. And when our permanent secretary wrote to staff last week after the spending round, one of the points he wanted to make was, because we're facing a 9.5% cut in 15-16, was that last year we managed to deliver all of this with a budget that was, I think, 23% smaller than it was in 2009-2010. And the large driver of being able to do that is we're doing things differently. You know, we're looking really hard at how we do things, including the management and delivery of change. And that's kind of why we've got to keep doing that, because the job is getting harder as we go. So I'm not sure there were sort of parties in the streets at the prospect of this massive set of things to do. But there was a real sense of a very clear agenda, very well articulated, and very high expectations about the way it was going to be delivered. And actually, when you get a chance to see, particularly universal credit, which obviously I'm closest to, operating on the ground, the enthusiasm and the hunger amongst our people for this thing that allows them to do something they've wanted to do for years is brilliant. You know, our people have always been fantastic at making change work and making it happen. And again, I think a lot of it's about tapping into that and making the best of it. But, you know, there'll be something else next time, and something else, and something else, and something else. And we'll have to keep finding different ways of doing things. I'm eating into the time for next sessions now, I'm quite conscious of. So I did just want to put one more picture up. There we go. Because I was thrilled to see that Winston Churchill said it's a good thing for an uneducated man to read books of quotations, for 2 reasons. One is simply to justify using quotations over the last 40 minutes or so, but also because I think it helps me make a really important point. I use quotations because it allows me to get help from people that I'm never going to meet. I mean, you know, not least because all by Henry Kissinger are dead. But it's a source of ideas. And if we all look around each other in this room now and elsewhere in the Sage, you know, we're surrounded by people whose knowledge, skills, and understanding can help us do what we need to do. One last quote from Machiavelli, who said that every prince needs allies, and the bigger the responsibilities, the more allies the prince needs. We've all got responsibilities, whether it's at work or more widely, and we all need help, and we need allies to help us discharge them. There's loads of potential allies in this room at this event. I think that's what makes something like Civil Service Live really important as an opportunity. You know, tap into these exceptional allies and these extraordinary allies. Make sure you've got at least one more alliance before you leave at the end of today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your questions. Enjoy the rest of Civil Service Live and have fun.